Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 16th of August of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the area in the vicinity of Crimea. Information appeared in Telegram chats that as a result of a missile strike by the Russians on the deployment point of the Ukrainians in the area of the settlement of Crimea in the Poltava region, the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian armed forces, Syrskyi, was liquidated. We are waiting for, of course, for confirmation. But telling the truth, if you remember the 2023, when the Ukrainians were attacking the Russians in the Zaporozhye direction, right before the Ukrainian counter-offensive operation, we got reports that either Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, and the commander-in-chief, former commander-in-chief Zaluzhny, were killed as a result of Kinzhal strike or as a result of Iskander strike as well. So there is nothing like some new when talking about Syrskyi himself, because it is normal practice before the beginning of something big to spread such information, to make disinformation and to force people think that something is happening. So anyway, this information confirms two things. Either Syrskyi was really liquidated by the Russians, or the Ukrainians are about to begin another offensive operation, which we will discuss in 5 minutes. Now let's move to the Kursk direction. We got a lot of very interesting updates, and the most important that the Ukrainians brought significant number of Western weapons exactly in this direction. And during the previous 24-48 hours, the Russians, as a result of Iskander strikes, as a result of counter-Iskander strikes, destroyed up to 3 HIMARS systems of the armed forces of Ukraine. In this video, we can see one of the HIMARS systems that was attacking the territory of the Russian Federation. The Ukrainians were trying to hide this HIMARS system in the forest, and the Russians destroyed with Iskander strike. This video we saw yesterday, and as for the 16th of August, today the Russian sources published 2 more videos from the same area. In this video, we can see another deployment point, and the Russians are saying that this is the deployment point of another HIMARS system, and the Russians attacked this territory as well. But this time, the Russians attacked this forest, this part of the forest, with 2 Iskander strikes. As you can see, during the video, you might see the secondary detonation and the secondary launch of HIMARS missiles. And later, the Russians were trying to get 100% proofs that they managed to destroy these multiple launch rocket systems, and they sent a drone to collect additional information. And as you can see, the Russians managed to discover some parts, parts of some vehicles, and according to the author of this video, we can see right now in front of our eyes the parts of the HIMARS systems that were destroyed during the previous night. Furthermore, during the previous night, the Russians attacked additional territories in the vicinity of Voropai. The Russians destroyed a tank that was attacking the Russian forces from the hidden positions. The clashes were taking place along the border. Another Iskander, but this time the Russians with Iskander destroyed just a regular tank. A little bit further to the south, in the vicinity of Yablushne, the Russians managed to discover the temporary position of Ukrainian air defense system, as I understand, and also as a result of Iskander strike, that air defense system was destroyed. Maybe the Russians were using Tornado S system, maybe Iskander. Anyway, summarizing everything, we can see that the Russians are not counting Iskanders to destroy even Ukrainian tanks along the border, which confirms that the Russians are very, very angry on the situation on their lands. Now let's talk about the Kursk area, about the territory of Russia. During the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians managed to improve their positions in some direction, but mainly the Ukrainians were focused on the area between the village of Tyotkina. This is the village of Tyotkina that is located along the border with Ukraine. The Ukrainians were concentrated in the area in the vicinity of Zvanne and in the vicinity of Glushkova. And according to the number of updates we've received from this direction, most likely this is the next Ukrainian target. Now let's talk in details. First, this morning we got the fire anomaly. If you take a look at the map, in the left corner we see a very big number of red squares, which confirms that these fields were set on fire, and there was a very big and huge fire anomaly, which confirms that there were very heavy clashes exactly in this area. Later we got the Ministry of Defense report and we got the report of the Group of Forces North. And according to them, the Ukrainians conducted two offensive operations. The first one took place in the vicinity of the village Apanasovka, and the second one took place in the vicinity of the village Gardievka. As you can see, according to this map, Gardievka was taken by the Ukrainians, and we have colored the territory in the vicinity of Gardievka based on the video we got yesterday from the village of Nizapne. And in this video we can see how the Ukrainians were taking off the Russian flag and were establishing the Ukrainian one. So based on this video we have adjusted the entire territory. But most likely either the Russians managed to restore control over Gardievka by counter-offensive operation, or the Ukrainians didn't enter the village yesterday. For now we don't know for sure, but the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported that they managed to repel every single attack in this area and not to allow the Ukrainians to cross the border. The question is why the Ukrainians are moving to the west, but not to the east in direction of the nuclear power plant or in the direction of the Kursk. The thing is that the Ukrainians are too far from these two strategical points. They don't have enough of forces, enough of resources to attack there. But the Ukrainians need to support their media activity and they need to support their media victories. So that's why they need to take more cities, more villages, and to show the Western countries that the Ukrainians are conquerors that can conquer almost the entire Russia. Anyway, if we take a look at the configuration of the Ukrainian breakthrough in the Sudzha and the Kursk direction, we can see that Ukrainians first of all managed to create something like a wall. So this is something like a wall. Let's go back a little bit to the west to Glushkova region, and there is one important natural barrier. We are talking about this river. This is the river by the name of Seym. This is very big and very fast and very dangerous river that basically split this territory in two parts. And the most important, that this river goes almost from the border with Ukraine till the village, till the city of Rylsk. And if you remember, since the beginning of the Ukrainian Kursk offensive operation, since the first day of clashes in this direction, the Ukrainians were trying to capture the village of Koreniva. But most of those attacks, every single, more precisely, attack that Ukrainians conducted in this direction was repelled by the Russians. The Ukrainians suffered losses and still haven't managed to capture this territory. The Russians are not counting vehicles, equipment and forces just to hold the city, because this is the key city for further Ukrainian offensive operation and for further Ukrainian success. As you can see on this video, according to the Russians, they're using the distance mining method, as the Russians were using the same method in the battle for Robotyne, to slow down the Ukrainians and to deal them critical losses during the redeployment forces from one village to another. So that means that the Russians managed to stabilize the situation in Koreniva, but it doesn't mean that Ukrainians are going to change their plans. They need to move to the west, they need to conquer additional villages. And what the Ukrainians are going to do next? And the most important, let's say, fact that we got today that can help us to understand the further, let's say, progress and the further plans of the Ukrainians are the updates that coming from the village of Zvanne and Glushkovka. The Russian sources reported that the bridges in both cities were damaged or destroyed by the Ukrainians. Anyway, the bridges, even if the one of the bridge ones wasn't destroyed, the Ukrainians managed to damage it significantly, and basically the Ukrainians managed to deal the critical damage, and now the Russians are no longer available to use heavy vehicles and heavy equipment to redeploy forces from the north to the south. So basically we can see that as a result of Ukrainian artillery strikes, maybe HIMARS strikes that were destroyed later in the Sumy region, the Ukrainians destroyed the logistic of armored forces of Russian Federation between the cities of Tyotkina, Karavyakova, Zvanne and Glushkova, and basically this region to the south of the river Seym is currently cut off from the mainland. And this is the reason why the Ukrainians were trying to attack and were doing everything they could, trying to capture the village of Snagast and to get as close as possible to Krasnooktyabrsky, because according to some sources they managed to break through the Russian defense belt, and the most important, the Ukrainians managed to cut the supply between Koreniva itself with this region along the railways. So this is the situation, and now we understand that for the Ukrainians it's the best time and the best opportunities to move further in the western direction and to take under control over every single city exactly in this artillery pocket between the Ukrainian border and the river of Seym. Of course, the Russians may try to build some pontoon bridges to stabilize the situation, but I'm not sure that the Russians have enough of time to redeploy such forces in this direction. Most likely, during the upcoming night, Ukrainians will activate their offensive operation through Tyotkino as well. If you remember, just yesterday we've been discussing the video of how the Ukrainians were bombing and attacking the infrastructure in the city, trying to destroy the Russian communication, the Russian internet equipment, the Russian HIMARS, different radars and so on. Most likely the Russians were cut off from the mainland. I'm talking about the connection, and so everything is ready to begin this offensive. Now let's move further. Let's talk about the eastern direction. During the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians managed to improve their positions, but not so much. Basically, the Ukrainians managed just to dig in deeper along the line of combat contact, to improve their positions, to shorten the combat line, and to get additional gains to the east, but not so big in comparison with the previous days. So according to different mappers, pro-Russian sources, the Ukrainians moved further in the western direction, eastern direction to Pushkarne, but for now, we don't know for sure whether they managed to enter there or not. Anyway, as for the eastern direction and as for the northern direction, during the previous 24 hours, we haven't received almost anything, just regular videos of how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian concentration of forces between the forests, in between the fields, between the cities. So nothing special, just regular activity. Now let's move further, and now we are going to talk about Crimea. Yes, about Crimea. We haven't been talking about this part of Ukraine, of the special military operation, for a very long period of time, and the previous night the Ukrainians conducted a massive missile drone strike in the territory, trying to destroy, guess what, the Ukrainians were trying to destroy the Crimean bridge, but the Russians managed to repel attack, and now we are waiting what the Ukrainians and the Russians are going to do next. First of all, the Ukrainians were using everything they have. The Ukrainians were attacking the territory of Crimea and the shore around Crimea with unmanned boats, but the Russians sent helicopters to counterattack the boats, and the Russians managed to destroy everything, or at least those who managed to survive returned back in direction of Odessa. Furthermore, the Ukrainians were attacking Crimea with significant number of drones, but most of them were brought down by the Russians. And the thing is, as you can see, the Ukrainians were attacking the Crimea from the western direction, and everything was destroyed by the Russian air defense. And when everything was about to be finished by the Russians and by the Ukrainians decided and made another attempt, first attempt to attack the Crimean bridge from the area of Pokrovsk. Correct me if I'm wrong, but something tells me that this is for the first time since the beginning of the special military operation the Ukrainians were attacking the Crimean bridge from the Pokrovsk direction. This is very weird, very strange, and very interesting, because Pokrovsk is very close to the line of combat contact, and the Russians are moving to the west, taking another city, another village, another fortification by another one. And to attack Crimean bridge from this area is very risky, because the Ukrainians were attacking the Crimean bridge with ATACMS systems. So the Russians may try to capture these systems, or the Russians may try to destroy these systems with HIMARS and then to show the video. Anyway, the Ukrainians were trying to trick the Russians, and to destroy the bridge they sent around 12 missiles, 12 ATACMS missiles, and the Russians are saying that they managed to destroy everything. And now the most important questions. Too many facts, too many things that possibly happened not so accidentally. We are talking about the reports about the deaths of Syrskyi. We are talking about attempts to attack on Crimean bridge, and we are talking about the yesterday report about significant concentration of Ukrainian forces in the vicinity of Orekhov. I'll remind you that the sources discovered the redeployment of lots of trucks with fuel. The sources spotted the concentration of vehicles, and lots of military experts began talking that the Ukrainians are about to begin the second greatest counteroffensive operation in direction of Crimea. And most likely, if the Ukrainians manage to destroy the bridge, we would already start receiving updates about the movements of Ukrainian tanks and vehicles in direction of Tokmak and Melitopol. But because of that fact that the Russians managed to destroy every single ATACMS, now the Ukrainians need to think more. And another important thing about the attack on Crimea, it was unusual attack because in the past the Ukrainians, when they were attacking the territory of Crimea, they tried to stretch this operation for 2, 3, 4 days. During the first day, the Ukrainians were attacking the Crimean, let's say, area with drones. Then they were attacking this territory with Neptune missiles. The next day, they were attacking this territory with Storm Shadows. And just on the fourth day, when the Russian air defense systems is almost, let's say, empty, is completely overstressed and overtested, the Ukrainians attacked the territory of Crimea with ATACMS, and they see no resistance from the Russian air defense. And the Ukrainians were destroying another ammo depot or another airfield or something else. But today, as you can see, the Ukrainians decided to skip these tactics. They decided to skip the first 3 steps when they were attacking the Crimea with drones and so on, and they decided to attack the bridge during the first day with ATACMS, and they failed. And most likely this is going to be a vital mistake made by the Ukrainians. Now let's move to the Pokrovsk direction, where the Russians continued their offensive operation, and during the previous 24 hours we got additional updates and from this foothold. The Russians established complete control over Novotoretsk, at least according to different let's say military experts and different military mappers. Furthermore, according to the sources, the Russians managed to improve their positions inside of Grodovka, and the Russians control around 10% of the city already. Furthermore, now we see that the Russians are moving to the western part of Grodovka from the southeast, and most likely the Russians will begin offensive from the northeast, from Novotoretsk, trying to attack the city from 2 directions and to force the Ukrainians to fall back completely. Furthermore, the Russians captured Mikhailovka, the Russians captured Orlovka, the Russians are about to finish the clearing of Zhuravka. So significant progress. The Russians managed to cut the death road. If you remember, during the just August, the Ukrainians lost dozens of vehicles along this line, and after this territory was secured by the Russians, they captured this area without almost any resistance from the Ukrainian side. Now the Russians are moving their drone control further to the west and to the south, and now we have another death road, and we are talking about the road M30. In this video we start receiving first vehicles that were destroyed as a result of Sudoplatov strike. The Ukrainians can't show any resistance. In Galitsivka, another vehicle was destroyed by the same squad. So we're not even talking right now about the death road. Now, according to the Russian experience and the number of losses they deal to the Ukrainians, we're talking about death areas, and this is something like this. Too many vehicles were destroyed. I'm not sure how the Ukrainians are going to replace them, but as for the replacements, the Western countries have already announced about additional military package that Ukrainians are going to receive. The US is open to sending long-range cruise missiles with a 450 kilos warhead to Ukraine. Germany announced about additional military help: 30 Leopards, Leopard 1 tanks, 400 armored vehicles, 4 IRIS-T systems. And this is not like to reinforce the Ukrainians. This is to replace the losses that Ukrainians have already suffered or about to suffer, or according to calculations, raw calculations, the Ukrainians will suffer during the battle for Kursk. And there are still problems with the Pokrovsk, and we see that nobody is going to replace the losses in this direction. Furthermore, the Russians renewed with the very big pressure offensive operation on the road TO425, TO524. We have a lot of updates, and in this video, for example, we can see how the Russians landed right in front of this stronghold and began storming this territory under very heavy fire from the Ukrainian side. Most likely the stronghold was captured. During this video we don't see whether the Russians managed to do this or not. They just landed right in front of the stronghold. In the bottom right corner we see the stronghold, and this is the stronghold on the map. If the Russians are able to take under control this territory, then we can start counting days when the Russians will will encircle this coal mine of the southern. Now, as for this stronghold, the Ukrainians saved the presence there. The Russians continue clearing this territory, trying to destroy the evacuations machines, the vehicles that goes in this direction. So this territory is still under Ukraine control, but as I understand, we can start counting maybe even hours when the Russians are going to capture this territory. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians resumed their attempts to attack in direction of Kurakhova. The Ukrainian sources of 46th Brigade published the video how the Russians were moving in this direction with a significant number of tanks and armored vehicles. The video was published by the 46th Brigade, so we need to understand that we're going to see just the losses from the Russian side, and obviously nobody is going to show us the progress of the armored forces of Russian Federation. But as I understand, the progress was significant. Furthermore, the Ukrainians attacked the Donetsk itself for the first time for the previous two. After the fall of Avdiivka, maybe this is the first time when the Ukrainians attacked Donetsk. They attack a small, not a very big mall, and the Ukrainians are saying that the Russians were using this mall to hide weapon and equipment. As you can see, a very big fire. The mall was completely destroyed as a result of attack. Maybe there was an ammo depot. Currently, we don't know for sure. This territory is very close to the line of combat contact, but the sources are saying that as a result of this attack, lots of civilians had a lot of problems, let's call it like this. As for Toretsk, New York, for the first time, probably for the previous weeks, we haven't received anything which confirms that this silence tells us more than lots of changes on the ground. Something big is happening, and a very big update is about to be shown us from different sources. Today there was few reports, and some Russian sources, very reliable sources, reported that the Russians control by the end of the 16th of August around 90% of New York. So most likely tomorrow or the day after, New York will be captured by the Russians and renamed from New York to Novgorodskaya. So as you can see, the situation is very critical. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.